Hello everyone, welcome to Winthrop and the World. I'm Paul Baskin, and with us today is Joe Aiello. Joe is a member of the town council here in Winthrop, also a fellow UMass alum, a career in international investment, is that right?
In infrastructure.
Infrastructure, yep, and a former member of an MBTA board. What is that?
The chairman of the Fiscal and Management Control Board. That was the board that was created after the heavy winter of 2015, when the T really fell apart and couldn't recover from that set of snowstorms.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. Again, Joe's a member of the 9-member Winthrop Town Council, the governing council essentially in town. So big issues in town these days. First of all, coming up is the vote, the election, a vote on April 5th. That's a referendum question on two subjects, 3 questions having to do with the fire station and the schools. What's your thoughts going into that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I appreciate it. Yeah, those are very important votes. We have a couple of fire stations that are over 100 years old that really, in my view, are unfit for our firefighting forces to work in and live in and to be safe. And they're nowhere near the standards of personal safety and hygiene when you're done with a fire, to be able to get into clean rooms and those kinds of things that a modern fire station should have. The buildings themselves are deteriorated. That's a big need in this town, and we've been really kicking the can down the road for too long on it. Right. On the other side is the schools, you know, it all relates to Proposition 2.5 and the limitation on what a municipality can raise for funds.
How much the annual increase in taxes in town?
And yeah, it limits you to 2.5%. Right. And as we know, we've gone through these periods where even in good inflationary periods, inflation rates tend to be about 4% or 5%, but we've gone through the COVID era when inflation really went to 8% and north of that in some periods. The schools were able to survive in that because of an influx of federal dollars, but those federal dollars have burnt off as they were intended to. Right. And now we've really hit a cliff on the ability just to sustain the level of education that has been provided over the last number of years. So it's really critical for the parents in this town and the students in this town, the children who we want to grow up and to become individuals that can be competitive in this world, to get the resources to the administration and the teachers.
So in both these cases, the town has rejected these before. At the same time, the need, as you just described it, seems pretty clear to many people. It sounds like therefore there's some kind of a disconnect in which we have this fairly clear need for the schools and the fire department, and yet the town's voters not saying yes to it. What's the disconnect? Are we asking for too much money? I mean, and the fire station, I guess, is $38.5 million is the request, but it's a little open-ended, right? It's not clear that's not necessarily a limit. The schools, rough numbers, somewhere around, help me, 20, 50, I think it's
about $3 million. And another item for $1.4 million, which are connected but distinct from each other.
Right, so it's a combination of just under $5 million is the number.
That's correct.
Yeah. So are these numbers, is it potentially these numbers are too big, or that that the economic stress that people of Winthrop are feeling is just, even maybe they might agree with what you're saying in terms of the need, they just feel they can't afford it? Or what's sort of the best analysis of why this vote has not been passing in the town up to this point?
Well, I think you hit it. The biggest part is really economic stress. I mean, these have been difficult times for a lot of people, not just in Winthrop, but across the country, as inflation and other things have sort of deteriorated people's spending power and all of that. And there's also, I would say, an underlying general distrust everywhere of the ability of government to take care of our precious dollars. And one of the things I think I have learned being a councilor here is that we operate on an incredibly thin budget, thin margins, and generally most of the departments, including the school department, don't have the resources that they need to. If you think about the school department, fire department, the DPW, police, et cetera, they do an incredible job with the limited resources that we have provided to them. So there should be confidence in the people who pay attention to this and are thinking about whether to support it or not, that we understand the preciousness of the tax dollar, and there's good evidence to show that we really do take care of it. We leverage our relationships with Massport and MWRA to try to help us with the resources that we need, not just through the financial arrangements that we have, but we're collaborating with them on across the board on a number of issues. So those are the real drivers, but the need is really there for both of these issues. What I think is different this time is that we're putting both on the ballot at the same time, so that the citizens can see both of the things that are going to be presented to them. And there's a lot of interconnectedness here. The children of this community and their parents, like everybody else, depend upon the fire department and depend upon their response, not just to fires, but also medical emergencies and other kinds of emergencies that happen through this town. Their ability to deal with potential implications of errant MWRA or Massport operations, that's critical. And at the same time, a lot of the firefighting force, we have a very young firefighting force, and we need to retain them. And they've got children in the schools as well, and they want to see it. So we're looking at what's happening out there as a joint effort between both parties for both of these efforts to see if we can get them both passed.
On the fire station, I mean, you mentioned the need there, but I think statistics nationally and maybe locally too are something like only about 4% or so of all fire calls into a fire station are actually for fires. Is it possible that there needs to be some way of making the whole system a little more efficient and more reflective of what the actual demand is for what the services that are provided?
Yeah, and I think we have recognized that and arranged that. And in past times, the fire stations might be even larger than what we're requesting at this point. But we need to be really much more self-sufficient than a lot of other municipalities. And part of it is driven by the egress limitations in this town, okay? Yeah. We do have firefighting arrangements with Revere and East Boston, but sometimes their ability to respond to us is much different than neighboring towns, say like Wakefield and Melrose might be.
Multiple roads in and out.
Multiple roads in and out. So that drives a good part of what we need to be prepared for here in this town.
So that does raise another issue, which is transportation more generally in town. There's constant talk that Winthrop is too congested, and I guess maybe one question, and I've asked others this too, is Winthrop, do you see Winthrop is too congested, and is that too congested in terms of people or cars or both?
Well, what I hear mostly is the congestion about the ability to get in and out of town. I don't hear a lot about congestion within the town. And that's really a function of our geography and the function that we have no control over the roadways going out to Revere or to East Boston. You know, there doesn't seem to be an ability to build another road anywhere. So we've got to manage those roads much better than we have today. And it's and we have to look for alternatives as well. This is a multi-dimensional problem. So let's sort of talk about a couple of them if time allows here. The ferry announcement that we heard yesterday, you know, this town has been trying to get the MBTA ferry service as a permanent thing. And we finally have achieved that this year. The T bought 2 boats, 1 boat for Winthrop, 1 boat for Quincy. Now we're going to have direct service into town. We're going to have weekend service.
For people aren't sure what you're referring to, which is the fact that the ferry service went from Winthrop all the way to Quincy, then all the way back to Boston. It took almost an hour to do that.
Almost an hour.
And now the service starting this summer. We don't yet have the schedule on how often it's going to run, but it's going to run weekdays apparently.
Weekdays at the beginning, starting Memorial Day, it's going to go to weekends as well. And the direct route, 20 minutes into Boston, which is sensational. So that's one piece, we've got to do that. The second is we've got to take more advantage of the bus service. So we do have healthy bus ridership, but we hardly have any bus shelters in town. So if you think about the winter months or the stormy months of rain and all of that, thinking that people are going to sort of sit there and get drenched or cold and there's no protection from the hot sun, as an example. We need to sort of think about the infrastructure a little bit, at least in a couple of critical places, to get the buses working a bit better. The fire chief is talking with the fire and police chiefs up in East Boston to think about better intersection management up at Orient Heights so that we can have greater throughput for people exiting through Saratoga Street, particularly in those periods when Winthrop Parkway, which is the roadway leading out to Revere, is closed because of the stormy weather there. We're also pressing DCR and the Healy administration to accelerate the studies that they are doing on replacing the seawall there and doing something about the roadway system so that as storms are coming and the sea levels increase their height, we don't end up with closed roadways. We can't afford that whatsoever. So,
although the looks at that situation have suggested the only answer is a bridge, which would be a lot of people describe as prohibitively expensive. Is there some other solution other than that? Again, this is the section from Winthrop into Revere.
Yeah, I don't know that a bridge is the right answer, to be honest. It could be on embankment. It may or may not be a bridge, right? That's for the technical experts to opine on. But the reality is that has to get fixed. It just, no alternative to that. We cannot survive with a part-time ability to get out through Revere and then a compromised exit out through East Boston. To me, if you talk about the 4 or 5 big critical issues in this town, that access problem is something that we're really focused on, and our state delegation shares that understanding and importance and advocacy.
So one potential solution on the Saratoga to East Boston route is there's an old rail line, I believe, that runs just parallel to Saratoga to the north, and there's talk about making that into a bike pedestrian lane, and that would then provide emergency access too, because emergency vehicle can go much quicker down a bike ped lane than it can plow through stalled traffic. Is that being moving along at all?
I'm not fully familiar with that as sort of an additional access point. What I am familiar with is changing the signal timing on a permanent basis up at Orient Heights Station. And in times when the Winthrop Parkway is fouled, in other words, we can't get out that way, that the state police would call the Boston police, and the Boston police would manually override the signal system and wave people through so people can get in and out of Winthrop
in an emergency.
The way they should.
In an emergency or on a regular basis?
No, every time that parkway shows down, automatically.
I see. Every time you'd have police out there just kind of flowing people through.
That's correct. And it is an emergency situation. It's a public health crisis, a public safety crisis. And I am glad the fire chief has focused on this, and which is really beyond the call of duty for himself. But he's taken it upon himself because it affects fire response, it affects ambulance response, all of those things as well.
Right. Has there been any thought about or question of whether you can solve the traffic congestion problem by continuing to have a car-oriented answer, or does it fundamentally require additional modes to get in and out of this town?
Well, we have those modes, right? Now we have the ferry, so that's a big thing, and we need to make that more robust. And if you can imagine building that ridership so that is running year-round, and if you could think about a trip every hour around the clock, during from, say, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., that is something that would be of enormous benefit. Now, it's going to take us a while to build that ridership and to build that case, but we're hoping to work with the T to market the service, make the service that is being provided used heavily by Winthrop people, and then we'll get more service over time and do that. So that's one element. The second element is make it easier to use the bus system and more convenient, more frequent service. Bus shelters, as I described before, to make sure everybody understands the app. You could sit in your house today and understand when the next MBTA bus is coming to the bus stop nearest you, so you could walk out with only 2 minutes to spare instead of waiting.
Yeah, there is a new app, and it sort of works, maybe not that great yet, but maybe it's going to get better. A couple things. One, yes, on the bus going out, you can obviously time it. On the issue more on the waiting, it seems to be, is more at Orient Heights, when you might get off the train at Orient Heights and the bus pulls up, or you wait a half an hour. And so there's not a shelter, really an indoor shelter situation at Orient Heights. Is there any talk of that? Or maybe even potentially, again, when we talk about housing, maybe even making the Orient Heights station into an apartment complex and sort of build it out over the top of the station, provide revenue for the T, and create a shelter for people to wait for a bus.
Yeah, well, I think we can advocate for a shelter before having to worry about a big development project, which is really none of Winthrop's business about what the T does in another community, I would just say this. We do need better protection there. It would be nice to get some heaters that other places use so that during the winter months it's difficult. We need some windshields to make sure people are not subjected to the wind. That's absolutely critical, and that's when I talk about making the bus system more useful and more compatible to the passengers' needs. It's both ways.
Right.
I agree with you.
As for the ferry, that's, I mean, obviously great news, but the price is now still going to be that price that's 2 or 3 times the price of an average T ticket. Is that, should we hope that or expect that that's going to really be robust ridership when that price is so much higher than a T ride, or even for that matter, driving through the Sumner and Callahan Tunnel?
Yep. No, price is a good point and an important thing. In the short term, people should know that if you are in the senior pass, or if you're eligible for one of the discount programs, and the T has a broad set of discount programs. As an example, if you are even a part-time student and 25 or younger, you can ride for half price, as an example. And there's a whole series of categories of folks. We just need to get that word out for people to make sure they understand. In the longer run, the price point is not the place where I think it should be, and it should be dramatically reduced. But there's a complete rethinking of ferry and commuter rail, and it's really comes from a historic standpoint. So commuter rail and commuter boat coming in from Hingham and coming in from places like Andover, in the old days, there were no standees allowed. Everybody took a seat, and it was mostly white-collar professionals that took it, and the T was able to command a big price point. The demographics of all the communities have changed. They've gotten much more economically diversified over time. And there's a lot of people out in places like Lynn and Salem who could come into town on commuter rail who don't because of the price point. Think about this as an example of the illogic of the T's fare structure. You can live in Quincy or Braintree, even farther out. You can hop on the Red Line, cost you $3.50 to come in. There's a train every 5 minutes. You can go up to Lynn, hop on the commuter rail, where there's a train every half hour during rush hour, and sometimes 2-hour lags on non-rush hour. And you pay $7.50. That's half the distance from Boston that Braintree is. It's illogical, and the T needs to rethink their pricing strategy. The ferry system is sort of for whatever reason, it's always been attached to the same pricing philosophy as commuter rail. And if we're going to get solve not just the Winthrop's accessibility problems, but traffic congestion around, so those people who need to drive are not always in congestion, but those people who can take the T can find it affordable, convenient, frequent. All of that pricing is certainly going to be part of that solution.
And what's your understanding of how engaged the MBTA is on that kind of a conversation with towns around here?
They're very engaged about that. One of the things that needs to happen is you need to think about the ability for a fare mechanism to be able to accept different fares over time. The commuter rail system is on a completely different fare platform, as is the ferry system from the rest of the transit system, making transfers impossible. We started the process, and Phil Lang's doing a great job of finishing that process, of bringing in a whole new automated fare collection system so you can have free transfers or discounted transfers, and you can also more easily change the price point of coming in by commuter rail, even do directional or time of day kinds of changes. So the tools to be able to do that are being put in place. My guess is that's going to be fully up and functional. It feels like in about another 18 months to 2 years.
Got it. All right, again, with us today is Joe Aiello, a member of the Town Council here in Winthrop. We were talking earlier about the town budget, and part of what we hear about when we talk about the budget situation in Winthrop is the fact that it's a town with very little, I mean, not none, but relatively little business. So it has to rely on the people of the town for most of its revenue. I guess I'm wondering, one, is that fundamentally sustainable, or does something need to be addressed about that? And sort of combined with that, we've heard talk that maybe one way to approach this is for the town to emphasize bringing residents to town who don't have children, because if you bring in children, that means higher costs for the schools. So I'm wondering, both of those questions, one is this town sustainable with the ratio of businesses that it has, and two, should we be avoiding families with children?
Jeez. Well, we'll deal with that last piece last.
Okay.
The reality is we have a very, very tight operating budget. And if we don't do a school override or some other kind of supplemental budgetary action where we pay for ourselves, we're going to have big, big problems in the education field. And eventually, it won't be problems with the education department. We won't be able to afford, we're already understaffed in the DPW. We're not fully staffed in the fire department or the police department. And some of those other things like elderly services, et cetera, are all going to find they're under more stress than they are today. We don't really have a lot of robust, we don't have any extra dollars, and so most everybody is working on limited budgets compared to other towns. On the capital side, we've got even bigger problems. One of the great things that Tony Marino, the town manager, has done is to look at the state of our infrastructure. So one of the things we've discovered since I've been a town manager, town councilor, and we can't take any credit for it, I think it's the great work of the town manager, is to look at our physical assets. So the first thing he did was have a firm come in and do a survey of all the buildings in town. We then had an audit of the water system, where the auditor said we're losing about $1 million a year in leakage.
So
Now,
pipes under the town that are just
that are bringing fresh water.
Right.
And don't forget, these are pipes that are over 100 years old, right? And we just haven't kept up with that pace. Steve Calla does a great job of using the resources.
The DPW director.
The DPW director of using the resources that are available to him to try to replace the worst ones on time. But the last time we heard a number on that was $60 million, and that was probably in 2018.
So 60 million. So we're losing $1 million in water a year, and it's $60 million. You're saying to fix those pipes.
It was in 2017 or so,
Okay,
right? And that's probably a bigger number today. I shouldn't say 2017. That was right in the middle of COVID, so 2021, more or less. But that undoubtedly is a bigger number today than it was back there. The state of good repair in the buildings over the next 10 years is about a $200 million expenditure. And now the thing we're focused on is all this flooding that's been happening around town. So you've got, 3 places that get actively flooding frequently. That's the Girdlestone neighborhood, the Pico neighborhood, and the Morton Street neighborhoods. When you add that in, as well as the work that needs to be done down by the Pillar Apartments and that area as well. That's a cost that's been estimated now at about $70 million or so.
Yeah. So these are just, so you're talking about just $70 million to fix one part of the town in terms of the
four parts of the town that are doing that. And that's really a function of, again, stormwater pipes that are aged.
Right.
They have been fouled, as naturally happens when you've had something. They're old clay pipes. The pipes aren't big enough. The storage capacity of those pipes is not big enough. And the outfalls have settled, and/or the tides are now higher for a longer period of time, so they don't have the exit capacity that they had before. This is a problem that's not unique to Winthrop. This is a problem that is a regional problem for all the older cities and towns around here.
Right, in terms of old pipes, but Winthrop does have low-lying conditions that make it even more
We have low-lying conditions that make it worse, but you could be on the edge of an older town that is exiting the stormwater into the Charles River or into the Mystic River. Same type of problem around here. This is something that we simply cannot fund ourselves, right? All of this infrastructure repair, but particularly the flooding I'm really concerned about, because that's people's lives, right? That's people's properties. That's God forbid, the ability to not be able to get emergency vehicles in and out. Whenever you have water lying around, you always worry about electric currents that might run through there. And to me, it's like the big immediate problem related to infrastructure that we've got to get at.
And can I just...
We need to be hyper-competitive in getting state dollars into this town to help pay for that stuff.
Right, because you're talking about numbers. The town's annual budget alone is about $60 million in that range, right?
That's on the operating side.
What's the total? What's the town spend a year roughly then? is not 60?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
yeah.
on
and about
the
half,
operating side.
Yeah, and about
budget.
half
Yeah.
schools, I think you were saying. Okay.
Yeah.
And we're talking numbers that are multiples of that we need to somehow come up with money to fix these long-term problems with?
Well, the 60 is an irrelevant number to
Okay.
that.
Okay.
The capital side, because don't forget these are all capital dollars. So the state, every municipality has an operating budget, and then a capital budget. A capital budget is to build buildings, fix roads, make new sidewalks, all those kinds of things. That annual budget, now that the COVID money has worn off, that we get primarily from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a lot of it by formula, is a little more than $2 million a year, more or less.
What I'm trying to get at is that again, we haven't talked very much, if at all, about the 3A issue, which is people may recall is the MBTA Communities Act. It's a law passed by the state that requires each town with any MBTA service to change their zoning. The issue in Winthrop is that we only have to modestly change our zoning to cover developments that already exist, so no real changes in what's being built, essentially. Yet there's forces in town that are fighting that, and that's going to potentially cost our eligibility for state money. How serious a problem is that for a town that seems very, very dependent on getting state money to take care of its basic needs?
Well, I'm one individual who's extraordinarily worried about that situation, right? And let me be clear. There's hardly anybody in town who says we want more development, more development, more development. We talked about the mobility problem, right?
Yeah.
You have more development that's only exacerbate the problem that we've got. We should be aware, let's imagine 3A goes away completely. Previous councils have previously rezoned certain parts of town, parts of the waterfront, the center district. There's probably at minimum another 400 to 500 units coming our way over time as the market.
Unrelated to 3A.
Unrelated to 3A,
Yes.
right?
So the town is growing.
The town will
either way,
continue to
yes.
grow, and we cannot have anything that adds to that issue. So we got a basic problem now. We're going to have some continued growth because of past council actions. I'm not saying they were wise or unwise, but that's sort of the situation we're in. And so anyway, that's sort of where we are. There are two pathways to resolving 3A. There have been folks who have, other towns, folks here that wanted us to join with other towns to sue the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We as a council have deferred on that and said we were not going to do it. A, we don't have money. And B, if they win a suit, we're going to benefit from the suit, right? Yeah. Milton unveiled that they have spent at least $250,000 on their suit.
Right.
We have heard
Milton
that
being a leading town in terms of this fighting.
in terms
3A.
of fighting the suit is 300. Rockport has sued. I mean, a lot of these towns have sued and spent a lot of money. We have spent nothing fighting it. Not that we don't want to resolve this issue, but other people are fighting exactly the same things we need, and we would benefit from their actions if that happened. But there was a case made that the law was 3A was unconstitutional. That was lost. The state, the legislation,
the state
Supreme Court said the law is constitutional. There was some debate about whether the governor's office can withhold money, grants that would come to the municipalities beyond a narrow set of 4 grants that were listed in the original legislation. And again, the Supreme Court ruled that the governor does have extensive power to withhold money.
Not just those 4
Not
grants.
just those 4 grants.
And not just some that were added later, but virtually any state money.
If you take just the economic development bond bill that was passed about 6 or 9 months ago, there are in there provisions for money that can come to the municipalities worth over $700 million, that Winthrop would be eligible for some part of that.
Right.
That says in the bond bill that was passed, it's now legislation, that says any town that doesn't pass a 3A measure is ineligible to access some portion of that money, right? In the last year or so, we have been turned down to about $1.6 million of what's called MVP grants, and that's the money to help with the flooding issue that would lead then
You've
to...
been town has been turned down.
Been turned down.
So it's an early sign that the state maybe is already...
That's what they're doing in other municipalities as well, right?
Yeah.
It's not just Winthrop. So one thing that I think I'm especially proud of is the work of the planning board. So we don't have a separate planning department. We have a volunteer planning board,
Right.
and the folks in that planning board just did an amazing job.
Right? Yeah, I mean, we're reaching to the end, but I just want to say that, yes. So they came up with a way of getting around
Taking
essentially
credit
three
for
yes.
everything we've built to make ourselves one of the denser communities around, and got the Commonwealth to agree that we would have to rezone for zero units,
right.
because they recognize the density that we had already come to.
Right.
So the choice will be, as those suits melt away, and if they continue to melt away, we'll probably have a proposal similar to what happened last time around. Again, we have not seen the permanent regs, so we might not be able to come back with that proposal, but we're waiting for the planning board to see what they come back with.
So we're almost out of time, but I don't want to leave without at least asking you, because this 3A situation leads into this question, which is the tone of public debate in Winthrop right now. It seems like the 3A has been a very high energy, high emotion moment for the town to go through. It's and I guess you know, of course, that's showed up at town council meetings where there's seems to have been sort of regular inability of people to speak politely, constructively to each other. There's been many episodes of people shouting out at the meetings. I mean, we're seeing this around the country too. It's not a Winthrop only thing. We're seeing. I mean, there was a story the other day about a public meeting in Idaho where they pull a woman screaming out of the meeting because she was speaking out. She was shouting out. I mean, I guess again, we're out of time basically. But I want to hear at least your assessment of what's going on in town, how serious it is, and what we need to do about it.
Well, public dialogue and respect for each other is a serious thing. And I think a lot of us, including myself, right, get caught up in the emotion and all that, and say things and do things that we regret. But we need to make sure that we're respectful of each other. But we also need to make sure that people feel free to speak out on all sides of the issue. I'll just reflect back on, my mother grew up in Italy during the time of the Mussolini era and the Nazis. German soldiers walking up and down the streets. And what she learned from that process, from that experience, and what her mother told us was, when people felt they couldn't speak and that they were going to be confronted with anger and hate, that was the beginning of the deterioration where the fascists won control, and then the Nazis moved in and all that stuff. So, I take it to heart, despite my own failures, that in this country, we really need to do the best we possibly can to be respectful of each other. Because today, you're disagreeing with Mikey or Sally over there. Tomorrow, you're on the same side on a different issue. And we need to remember that. We need to continue to build bridges. And I think that's probably more important than anything else that we can do in this town and in this country. And sorry to get a little emotional.
No, I hear you. It's an important conversation. I hope we can have more of it. I'm grateful for you coming in today. Again, our guest today was Joe Aiello, a member of the Town Council here in Winthrop, and we're grateful for your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.